Hello and welcome back to episode 2 of Dragon December, this month's celebrations of all things draconic in the lead up to the festive period. For me, it culminates in Christmas, which I'm hugely excited about if you can't tell, or if you're new to the channel and haven't heard me excitedly talk about it. But if I can pry you away from your mulled wine or your cinnamon-topped coffee for a minute distraction about dragons, I can share this other passion with you. If you're new to the channel, then my name is Josh, this is the Arcane Forge, and I like to draw creatures from D&D. I talk about their mythology and lore, what they're like in game, and so on. With this being Dragon December, this whole month is dedicated to dragons, and I thought we could cover a lesser-known dragon in D&D. Today's topic was first suggested by Moonring, a very active member of the community. Also, Hoarding and Yorick have been talking really actively about these dragons over on the Discord server. There's an Arcane Forge community Discord, which is very, very welcoming. There's a lot of chat. I'm on there as well, quite a lot. I'll make sure to leave a link to that down below in the description box. Totally free, open to everybody. Make sure to come and say hi. But today we're going to be talking about pink dragons, one of the lost types of dragons that D&D used to know, but has faded from obscurity in our most recent edition. While Hoarding and Yorick have been theorizing about what this creature might be like over on Discord, I'm going to give it my own go, my own spin, and, well, let's see what we come up with. As far as I can tell, the earliest rendition of a pink dragon in D&D can be found in Dragon Magazine issue 156, published in April 1990, exactly 1 month before I was born, funnily enough, in an article called The Monstrous Compendium. This article seems to largely have been played for laughs, potentially as an April Fool's joke, although I don't know that for certain. And it included things, such bizarre creatures, as Jello monsters, a humorous play on the gelatinous cube, a killer spruce, a paper dragon, which actually is in D&D now, not as a joke, a mandrake, which is a duck who can assume the form of a pretty dumb human, a pigeon toad, blink mammoths, which have become a bit of a meme in the community, werehares, unicows, as in unicorns that are bovine, to name only a few of the absolute gems that this issue gave players. But among their number was a pink dragon, which was described as follows. Pink dragons can be found almost anywhere, most frequently in some form of underground lair. Many helpless adventurers have been fatally fooled by a dragon's dopey appearance and delicate pink coloration. Pink dragons love to talk, but they're prone to eat those who do not laugh at their jokes. The breath weapon of the pink dragon is highly unusual. A special stomach serves to mix fatty secretions with a fluid closely resembling lye. The resulting goop produces a breath weapon, a bubble cloud, similar to that produced by a horn of bubbles, a magic item. This cloud is 60 feet long and 50 feet wide, and 20 feet high, and it lasts for 2 to 12 rounds. Anyone trapped in this cloud is painfully blinded for 4 to 16 rounds due to soap in his eyes, making magic virtually impossible to cast. This places a -6 penalty on all attack rolls, saving throws, and damage, 1 HP damage minimum, and negates dexterity bonuses to armor class. Movement is random as the affected person stumbles around. A successful save versus breath weapon indicates that a character closed his eyes before the soap affected them, in which case only the normal penalties for fighting blind apply, without the distraction caused by the pain of the soap in the eyes. If the victim's eyes are protected, as by goggles, the obscuring effects alone are operative, giving only a -2 modifier to hit for as long as the bubbles last. There is no saving throw against the obscurement effect, as the cloud also affects infravision and ultravision. When the bubble cloud is in place, the dragon merely closes his transparent protective third eyelids and, using a bat-like sonar, attacks with his highly accurate claw-bite routine. Those few pink dragons able to use magic, 20%, gain 1 first-level mage spell, as per illusionists, determined randomly, for each stage of growth. If a spell is rolled twice, the dragon is able to use that spell twice per day. Due to the somewhat silly appearance of the pink dragon, it completely lacks any sort of fear aura. End quote. The intrusion of the pink dragon lets the article down, in my opinion. There are a lot of problems with it. Firstly, that every character, all dragons and so on, are assumed to be male, with he, him pronouns, but that wasn't uncommon at the time. but more than that, using the outdated notion that pink is delicate, feminine, and therefore juxtaposed with the terror and might of a dragon, we're supposed to find it funny. For example, at the end there we heard that it doesn't have a fear aura effect because it's pink. Or we should have been supposed to find it funny in the 90s apparently. But I'd like to give us all more credit and assume that we're more secure and beyond that now. The truth is, pink is culturally associated with femininity, or at least it has been since the mid-1900s. It wasn't always the case. At one point, pink was seen as the colour associated with young boys. One article in particular springs to mind. There was an article in the 1918 publication of Earnshaw's Infants Department, which declared that, quote, since it was derived from red, pink is for the boys and blue for the girls. The reason that pink, being a more decided and stronger colour, is more suitable for the boy, while blue, which is more delicate and dainty, is prettier for the girl, end quote. But the issue is with femininity in general being something that is mocked for the sake of femininity. It ties into a more sort of systemic issue that women aren't really culturally allowed to enjoy anything, really. If they do, it's usually something that we make fun of, deride, and grind into the ground. If things are too feminine and girly, then they're silly and pointless, dumb, like our unfortunate pink dragon friend. If women take up hobbies that are more traditionally associated or gatekept by men, then they're trying too hard. They're fake, or just doing it for male attention, in the eyes of society. The classic example is the idea that women only play video games or fake playing video games for male attention, and so on. It's ridiculous, it's outdated, and flagrantly misogynist. We're all better than that. So I think we can give a pink dragon the respect of any other dragon and not play it for laughs. Basically, I definitely want to take this creature in another direction and allow pink dragons to be fierce and monstrous creatures that they deserve to be, so that we can discard, perhaps slay, at least one more micron of archaic misogyny that clings to D&D for dear life. So what can they be instead? Well, in the past I've looked at covering the, quote, other missing dragons, using the colour wheel and colour theory to fill in the gaps that we have with various colours of chromatic dragons. Purple, yellow and orange dragons were ones that I've covered a couple of years ago when I first started doing Dragon December, and they were implied by the existence of green dragons, for example, being a fusion of yellow and blue. This was expanded on by a very early dragon magazine I found, which included these rare dragons and set out some ground rules for their existence, rare though they may be. We may be missing pink, teal, brown, grey, and a whole host of other dragons that may exist as a result of various unlikely unions of other primary coloured or tertiary coloured chromatic dragons, no matter how rare those occurrences may be. And that's not to mention how many missing types of metallic dragons may litter our D&D campaign worlds. Most of the periodic table of elements are metals. I think we have, canonically, 4 or 5 of those now, at least in 5th edition. That said, I'm researching this and recording this video in the middle of October and the start of November. At the time of writing this, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, a supplemental book for 5th edition, all about dragons, has only just come out. Unfortunately, my edition has not arrived on my doorstep, but with the inclusion of that book, there may be such creatures as pink dragons in there and even more, but as it's slated to be released in November 2021, and you're watching this in December, you'll know better than I do. I may need to come back to this video and add an addendum or some kind of little edit in the comment section perhaps. But in the meantime, I'd like to apply the same logic that I have in the past to the existence of pink dragons and homebrew some kind of stat block for them so that you can use them in your campaigns on the off chance they don't appear in Fizbans. The link to that will be down below in my description box or on my website. So no matter what, you're walking out of this video with a free pink dragon stat block from their wormling stage all the way up to their ancient stage. But in order to do that, we need to think about what we can actually deduce about pink dragons. Well, like purple dragons being a fusion of red and blue dragons, like orange dragons being a fusion of yellow and red dragons, no matter how unlikely it is, if a pink dragon comes about from the union of a white and a red dragon, according to colour theory, what traits are they likely to take from each of their parents? Well, red dragons are considered the most powerful chromatic dragons, and white dragons are considered the most animalistic, the least intelligent of dragons, but are also the most predatory, the sort of bestial hunters of the chromatic dragon family. This paints a pretty horrifying precedent for how pink dragons might behave. They're potentially cunning and instinctive hunters with more power behind their aggression than white dragons, and maybe more intelligence than them as well. Red dragons are easier than most dragons to circumvent the wrath of through praise and worship, however, and they can be bought off with promises of gold if the conditions are just right, as their obsession with treasure is absolutely legendary. Expecting this to be true of a pink dragon might be a fatal mistake though, as their white dragon heritage might make their intentions purely predatory, rather than their motives being swayed by promises of praise or self-aggrandizement. Red dragons, as famously popularized by Smaug in The Hobbit, make their lairs deep in mountainous regions, burrowing deep into the earth to find rich veins of precious and valuable metals. Or, more likely, they dig deep into volcanoes, making a nest for themselves surrounded by molten rock where the intense heat feels comfortable to them. White dragons also favour desolate mountains to lair in. Interestingly enough, rather than sleeping under a mountain of buried treasure or over molten lava pits, white dragons climb to the ceilings of their mountain habitats and sleep while hanging from the stalactites like a bat. They, unlike red dragons, prefer frozen Arctic conditions to make their homes, but it's interesting that they too like distant mountains as their homes. So we can deduce a few things from these habitats about what a pink dragon might like. Firstly, we know that pink dragons will be great at burrowing and digging like both of their parents. They'll also like to live in mountains. Due to the complete opposite polar temperatures that these creatures enjoy, a happy mid-ground would probably be presuming that pink dragons like to live in mountains of moderate temperature and climate, and this in turn might indicate a reason for their rarity. Among the usual reasons that most chromatic dragons view others, even of their own species, beneath them and therefore very unlikely to find value in a partner of a different chromatic scale colour, therefore making this union of red and white very infrequent. If a pink dragon is born from this incredibly unlikely union, their choice of habitat may directly encroach on those that the majority of humanoid species find comfortable, good farming land in this moderate temperature. So a pink dragon plaguing populated lands might attract a lot of adventuring parties and would-be dragon slayers, providing either a lot of free meals for these beasts or a lot of challenges which may result in their minimal populations. Red dragons breathe a cone of flame and white dragons breathe a cone of frost, so it seems fitting that either pink dragons would have some kind of water breath attack in some massive cone, dealing perhaps bludgeoning damage, or what would be considerably more fun is if they exhaled a blistering cone of boiling water and steam at their enemies, much like a dragon turtle. We know that white dragons are almost constantly hungry and love swimming for their food, often hunting large fish or even whales if they can get their claws onto them. But they only like to eat things that they have frozen solid with their breath weapon. Red dragons often eat livestock, adventurers and so on. They're obsessed with status and often demand fealty and tithes from local leaders who dwell within the dragon's hunting grounds, accepting tributes that these people deem valuable. If they're feeling particularly cruel, and honestly, when aren't they might ask for portions of the population, firstborn children, a ruler's partner, celebrities and so on, that people look up to eat. So their diet will vary, but as long as it's valuable and living, they will fill their guts with it. So our mid-ground here is pretty vague, but perhaps they like to boil their prey using their breath weapon, as their white dragon parent tends to enjoy with a frost equivalent. Perhaps in the pink dragon's case they superheat rather than supercool their food. They might have a more varied diet, but could eat mostly fish, as this temperate climate might put them somewhere close to water, perhaps a humid cave system. So I'd imagine their homes needing a large supply of water nearby, maybe lochs, rivers, or oceans within a few miles, maybe even running through their mountainous homes. Perhaps mountains overlooking steamy rainforests might be an ideal place for these creatures, and with that comes many exotic fauna that dwell within the jungles and forests of more humid climates, especially those creatures who are rare and close to extinction to imply a sense of value to their kills. Now, while I have your attention, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say a massive thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, without whom this content would not exist. Making these videos is a huge undertaking. It takes up a massive amount of my time, and I consider it work. So my patrons over on Patreon essentially pay me for the time that it takes to make this content, to make this entertainment. For a lot of them, that's £1 a month. which is already paying me more than YouTube advertising will do for this video's entire lifetime. But those of them who pay me the price of a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, once a month and above deserve special mention. And this month they are Raptor Dio, Duck Quack, Nicholas G. Silver, Jonathan Foster, George Punton, Nap in Camo, Yorick Beese, The Smiling Sadist, Amanda and Jake Westfall, Ethan Dibby, Nathan Stratton, Bartle Gruff the Great, Braxton Hudson, Cav Manick, Matt Lichtenwallner, Helfie Wolf, Peter Balfe, Max Schluter, Darth Gaetana, Oliver Thorvald Mellock, Colby Monroe, Styrax, Ryan H., Steve Harrison, Max Copeland, Tamerling, Dan Waterman, Sam Hickson, Dominique Jolly, AJ, Christian Palmer-Smith, and of course Aldrin as well. So thank you to everyone on Patreon, but in particular a massive thank you to all of these people who helped make this content. So if you enjoy this content, and if we were to meet in person and you'd think to offer me a cup of coffee, then I'd urge you to go and check out Patreon. I'll leave a link down below in my description box where you can go to do that, and I really appreciate that. If that's something that you can't afford, then that's what these very, very generous souls are doing. They're paying for the people to watch this content who can't afford that. So thank you all so much for your help and for paying for the viewers who can't pay for themselves. That's really kind of you. But I've diverted. Which brings us onto their hoarding. All dragons hoard something. They're obsessed with collecting. White dragons hoard treasure, just like red dragons, including gold coins, which are said to glitter like stars in their frozen lairs, embedded in the layers of ice. They collect broken parts of ships and trophy-like bones of their victims. With the white dragon's photographic and perfect memory, they remember every moment of their lives as if it's happening right now, so they relive every single coin's acquisition, every slaughtered foe, and so on, with as much clarity as the moment in which it occurred. They also love to hoard diamonds due to their beautiful similarities to perfect crystals of ice. Red dragons are most famous for being gold and treasure hoarders in D&D, obsessively amassing value in any form they can find, with a particular fondness for gold and gemstones. So we can safely assume that a pink dragon would hoard much the same thing: gold, treasure of all kinds, and in particular shiny gemstones, prioritizing those of greater value over those of greater size or clarity perhaps, unlike their white dragon parents. But value, gold, and in particular gemstones seem to fit quite well. Maybe the bones of rare creatures they have helped to hunt to extinction, picked clean as the boiling heat of their breath draws the meat from these creatures' skeletons. What does this mean for how they attack? Well, I've said that their lairs may be over thermal vents and natural baths of boiling water in jungles, allowing these creatures to hide in clouds of steam which fill their lairs, allowing them to use similar attack patterns to their white dragon parents, who like to hide underground, emerging from the ice to blast their foes with their breath weapon, ending a conflict before it has a chance to begin. So perhaps pink dragons like to do the same, emerging from the steam to blast with their breath weapon, quickly ending a conflict before it arises. I gave them very similar stats to white dragons of all levels, but with the minds of red dragons at various challenge ratings, to indicate that these creatures are less bestial, more intelligent, but not quite as strong as a red dragon, for example. Dragons of various elemental types tend to be immune to a certain type of damage. With this creature being a fusion of two polar opposites, I didn't feel like that was appropriate, but I gave it a steam breath attack as its elemental blast of breath weapons, so I felt that it was more appropriate that these creatures be more likely to be immune to fire damage. So, as they age, I basically said that these creatures start off as resistant to both cold and fire in terms of energy damage. Later on in their lives, as they approach adulthood and the form of the ancient dragon, they gain immunity to fire but maintain only a resistance to cold damage. I said that it's rare that any adventurer would encounter a lost dragon like the pink dragon. They are few in number, but mighty in power. In order for a pink dragon to be born, the unlikely union of a red and white dragon must occur. This is doubly rare. Not only because these two dragons lair in completely opposing climates, and therefore it is reasonable to assume that they may never encounter each other, but also because chromatic dragons are incredibly self-centered and find all other forms of dragon, even those of different scale colors, to be beneath them. If a white and red dragon do mate, however, their offspring will inherit traits of both and will grow to become an incredibly deadly monster in its own right. A pink dragon has wisdom and intelligence behind its eyes, more like its red dragon parent, and great spined horns form a crown around its head, and leathery crests run the length of its body, terminating in a paddle-like tail which it uses to aid in swimming. The scales of a wormling pink dragon are fleshy and pale, often showing its blood vessels and veins through its skin. Their eyes are opaque black voids to assist in the darkness of their cavernous habitats. As the dragon ages, its scales become tougher and more vibrant in colour, and its need to hide in the darkness of their lairs becomes less necessary, and the attitude of the predator grows in its heart. I chose this because A, the first thing I think of when I think of a pink lizard, or pink amphibian I guess, is the axolotl, a cave-dwelling salamander with these beautiful pink frilly gills along the sides of its neck. They live in rainforests in South America in deep dark cave systems, but importantly, if they're ever exposed to light for too long, pigmentation increases in their skin until they turn almost jet black. This is an irreversible process. So I like the idea of them having these sort of axolotl-like gill features across its head that gradually become keratinized and harden into long horns, much more closely resembling the horns that a red dragon is famous for. That its scales start off transparent like the axolotl and eventually become this bright, deep, vibrant, magenta-like pink as they grow bolder and have less need to hide in the darkness. Very few things can be considered hunters of an ancient dragon, for example. Why would they need to camouflage? I said that pink dragons are more cunning and tactical than their white dragon parent, but still have a bestial lust for hunting. A pink dragon consumes only food that has been boiled to death, devouring creatures killed by its steam breath weapon as their flesh softly melts away from their bones, their skin degloving from their muscles while they writhe in agony. It litters its lair with the clean bones of its victims, taking pride in pristine skeletons which it needed to damage very little in combat, being instead burned to death quickly by its steam breath. A pink dragon also keeps the bodies of its greatest enemies as trophies, hanging their bones from stalactites and stalagmites in its cavernous nests, where it can look upon them and gloat. The remains of dire jungle cats, exoskeletons of enormous insects and wandering heroes are often positioned prominently within a pink dragon's lair as warnings to intruders. Pink dragons don't have quite the perfect memories of their white dragon parents, but they hold on to certain precious memories in absurd detail. This is an honour they mostly reserve for great meals and epic battles. Pink dragons lair in damp and humid caves and deep subterranean chambers far from the sun. They favour high mountain vales accessible only by flying, caverns in cliff faces, and labyrinthine caves in rainforests and jungles. Pink dragons love vertical heights in their caverns, flying up to nest on mesa-like stalagmites, overlooking their vast hoards of gold and bones. A legendary pink dragon's innate magic deepens the humidity in the area surrounding its lair. Mountain caverns are converted into oppressively sauna-like networks of hot springs and overgrown with prehistoric-looking ferns due to the pink dragon's presence. A pink dragon can often detect intruders by the smell of sweat and fear given off by their sweltering prey as they traverse its habitat. A pink dragon rests on high stone shelves and cliffs in its lair. The floor around these nests are a seething pool of ever-bubbling water, hidden pits and slippery slopes. As foes struggle to move toward it, the pink dragon flies from its perch and destroys them with its boiling breath. I gave it lair actions if you are unfortunate enough to wander into this creature's lair. The first one is a boiling geyser like Old Faithful, which deals 6d6 fire damage on those who don't pass a dexterity saving throw to avoid this column of water. I said that some of the jagged stalactites could fall from the ceiling, hitting a target and dealing 3d6 piercing damage, or that boiling steam and fog might fill a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point that the dragon can see within 120 feet of it, not only obscuring the vision of those within this cloud, but also boiling their skin, dealing 3d6 fire damage to those who start their turn within this seething cloud. All chromatic dragons and their connection to the elements, being embodiments of the material plane, alter that plane merely by living within a certain location. And the pink dragon is no different. I said that a humid mist lightly obscures the land within 6 miles of a dragon's lair. The extreme heat and moisture cause all plant life within 6 miles of the lair to grow abnormally large very quickly, attracting many creatures who would be at home in a jungle, like mosquitoes and other large insects which would scuttle towards the area. Most importantly, as you get closer and closer to this dragon's lair, I said that great boiling natural baths block off areas in the dragon's lair, some being as deep as 60 feet, and seething hot to the touch. Characters who attempt to swim through these pools count as affected by the heat metal spell. So definitely a very, very nasty thing to do if you're wearing a lot of armour. But then, who's going swimming in plate armour, I ask you? Surely not any reasonable and logical players. Heaven forbid. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the Pink Dragon, and I hope you can find a place for it in your campaigns. If you do, you can find the stat block, like I say, in the description box below or on my website. It's not going anywhere, so you can check that at any time. It's absolutely free. So I hope you enjoy that Christmas present, that holiday present, whatever holiday it is you celebrate. And I hope you return here for the next episode of Dragon December. I should be posting things on Mondays and Wednesdays. Sometimes there's live streams, sometimes there's more dragons like this, as we get closer and closer to the end of the festive period. So thank you so much for joining me today, and until next time, stay safe, pack some light, non-metallic armour if you're going after a pink dragon, and if your characters are taking a break in steamy natural hot baths, maybe bring a dagger as well as a towel.